You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast.
Welcome back to the SG Drive-In. I'm one of your hosts for today's episode, the Midwest's favorite son, Brandon Knight, joined today by everybody's favorite Joshua Knoll, and the Philadelphia boy himself, Joe. Gentlemen, seeing good movies so far this summer? Sounds like a rousing no.
Bob's Burger movie. That was I enjoyed it.
Okay, I haven't seen it yet.
I could have easily seen it at home and been just fine, but it's kind of fun getting to see Bob's Burger in a grander environment.
Sure, makes sense.
I'm like, yeah, sure, they did this, and I'm glad they did. I don't know if it's for everybody, but
that's how those adult cartoon movies usually end up being anyway.
Yeah. A, you must have misheard, but Brandon said good. B, I had the opportunity, we talked about this when Josh and I talked about Star Trek, but I had the opportunity to see Star Trek the Motion Picture in theaters a couple of weeks ago, and it was phenomenal.
Nice. As for me, I've seen several movies already this summer because, gosh darn it, are these episodes for Stranger Things this season so dang long. I'm not here for it. The season's great, but I'm just not here for the length of these episodes. Well, then let's get into today's episode. We are back here for our summer blockbuster series. And, we got to talking and we realized, how can we do a summer blockbuster series without talking about the granddaddy of them all, the one who started this whole thing, Jaws? Plus, we took a look at the calendar, and if we inserted one more movie, it was going to take us to Labor Day, which is the official end of summer for most people. Not for me. I always started school way before Labor Day, but that's besides the point. So we're here today to talk about Jaws. This is the summer movie for me. If we weren't going to cover it this year, I was going to make a plea bargain to have it recorded next year. Just everything about this is so summer. It's the beach, it's Memorial Day weekend, it's the ocean, it's sharks. I don't know what the sharks part has to do with summer, and we always had, growing up, we had a set of movies that we would watch every single summer. The Indiana Jones trilogy was a part of that. The original Star Wars trilogy was a part of that. Eventually, the Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy joined in that. My mom is a big Harrison Ford fan, which is evident because I wrote the list and there's only Harrison Ford movies on this list for this summer. So we would always watch one of his random insert Harrison Ford flick here, and Jaws. That was usually what we would watch throughout the summer to get things started. I love this movie. It is so good. Josh, what were you going to say?
Yeah, most people don't realize that this is actually a Harrison Ford film. Yeah, he was the shark. Yeah,
he is the shark.
yeah. That's how that goes.
So this wasn't really as much in my periphery as a kid. I remember the first time I was introduced to the concept of Jaws was actually the first time that I was at Disney World. I was 7. My sister was a part of the band, and they did rotating band trips every year. And one of the every 7 years they would do a trip to Disney World. And so my mom, my sister, and I all went with the group and all that. And I remember seeing this giant animatronic shark. And I didn't grow up, surprisingly, being on the East Coast, I didn't grow up really close to a beach. You had to drive at least an hour, if not a little bit further, to get to a legitimate beach. You could go to any number of lakes anywhere. That's one thing, but an actual out and out beach. And so I will absolutely admit to the fact that this is not one of those movies like some of the others that you guys have heard me gush over, where there's no real tie for me. It's a fun popcorn flick. I will admit to what it is, except for when people call it horror, but we'll get there.
We will get there.
But yeah, I mean, all in all, an average movie. I would say that Moby Dick did it first and better. So there's that. But
first, yes. Better, no. The characters were just so much better developed in this. That's one thing for me. I will enjoy characters more than I enjoy plots a lot of the time. If you get the character right, I'm like, cool, sure, whatever. Which is part of why I've been so okay with a lot of the MCU movies, is where I'm like, hey, man, they might have really missed a lot of this story, but they got the character. That's what I wanted to see on the big screen was Captain America. Sure, it wasn't his exact story, but that was him.
So I know that there are Jaws apologists out there that will absolutely fight me on this one. But it's interesting because I'm like you. The plot is third in the hierarchy for me. Lived in world, immersive, let me feel the atmosphere and all of that. Cool, good. That is the surefire way to get me hooked. Compelling characters is a second. If you can flesh out the characters, if you can make me care about them, then I will care a lot more. The actual plot of the movie, yeah, it's always good to tell a good story. But if you have those other two pieces in place, then that third one becomes a lot more forgivable if it's not there. And to me, going back and watching this movie in preparation for this, he just kind of comes across as generic fisherman number 5, like nothing real compelling. Like I understand what they were going for, but that's why I say things like Moby Dick did it first and better, because other works to me were able to flush out that role that the main character. I know most people say Jaws is the main character. The shark is the main character. The shark is not the main character, but.
That would be correct. He is not.
That
the
human
shark.
Right. That human element is just meh. Just kind of falls flat for me. Okay. Like I get it. He's after him and all this kind of stuff, but like, why do I care? I don't.
Just to clarify, are you talking about all 3 of the main characters? Or are you talking about specifically like the chief who's like trying to track down the shark? Are you talking about the guy who actually has the boat?
So I'm
trying to harpoon it. Yeah.
So at first I was talking about the chief, but I guess a lot of what I'm saying could be extended out to the other characters as well, that they all kind of fall into this category of like not the reason why I would be watching it. Like I said, popcorn flick, sometimes you shut off your big brain and you just enjoy a popcorn flick with a giant man-eating shark in it and be good with that. And that's when I watch this movie, that's what I'm good with, but it doesn't go any further than that for me.
Okay. I watch it for Hooper. Just that character alone, like even when I can't remember like a lot of the specifics of the movie, I'm like, that's just one of those rare characters that just stands out, that I love that character. To me, he felt very human. I actually really liked Mayor Vaughn as a bad guy.
Okay.
I feel like he was a better bad guy than Jaws. That being said, Jaws is still my favorite Universal monster, so there's that.
Hop off.
That's a joke.
Oh,
that is a joke.
The response from Joe. You did that on purpose.
I did. I know that's Joe's favorite, and I don't want to take it from him. So.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. I will say the human element of the antagonist role was better than the shark being in the antagonist role. I thought that added some substance to the movie that would have otherwise just been a disaster flick.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting to look at. The sales for Jaws did really well at drive-in theaters the year of 2020.
Yeah.
And when you compare Mayor Vaughn to our political leaders at the time, with not getting political, not naming anyone specific,
you are the only person who always wants to make it political, and you always have to go, but it's not. I'm not trying to get political.
Well, guys, I'm not trying to. I got to back this. Don't pull a hamstring backing up, bud. Like,
listen. I'm not trying to get partisan, is what I mean.
Okay.
I'll get political all day.
Okay.
I'm not calling either side out. But there sure was a lot of people saying things like, hey, man, if you yell shark, that's bad for business.
Yeah.
But there's a shark guy.
I will agree that the mayor, there is a lot of similarities to how the mayor operated in the movie to a lot of what we saw by many politicians across the board in 2020. That is the most politically correct way I can think to say that.
Yeah.
And I do agree also, Josh, before I go to you, Joe, I do also agree. I agree that for the most part, it's just generic fisherman number 5, other than Hooper. I do really like Richard Dreyfuss. When I turn on this movie, I know I'm in for a good laugh with him. So I do agree with you on that as well.
I'm
Joe,
always here for the comedic relief. Love those guys.
Right.
So, rapid fire, love Richard Dreyfuss. He's one of those actors that kind of transcends the role for me. I think he's good in most everything that I've ever seen him in. As far as everything regarding the commentary on 2020, I will say yes. And then, look, guys, here's the segue. I'll grab the wheel and turn us in the other direction. You mentioned drive-in theaters. That was one of the coolest things for 2020 for me, to be able to see these timeless classics in a medium like drive-ins that, people that have, everybody from Will's age on through to TJ's age, bookmarking the two ends of the spectrum for the panel here. That's an experience that some grew up with, but others that had the opportunity to be able to experience that same kind of nostalgia trip, even if it's not nostalgic for them.
Back on Jaws for a moment. I believe it was the immortal Jack Black in the movie The Holiday who said that it's amazing what John Williams was able to do with 2 notes to be able to create one of the most iconic scores and iconic villain-esque characters, antagonist characters. This is part of the reason why I think Jaws has transcended and become just like this cultural phenomenon is the score.
Yeah. He's actually said that this was the movie that he thought really made him, took his career off, and
really
might be true. A lot of the stuff that I know him from is later on. So
it's true.
Yeah, there's so many of these movies that we are going to be covering throughout the summer that all walked so that way the current crop of movies could run. You've got the Avengers ensemble piece and these modern day really big soundtracks, but you don't have any of that without Star Wars, without Jaws, without Indiana Jones, without Jurassic Park.
I can't even describe
so on and so
the
forth.
amount of just joy I get when I hear the Indiana Jones theme. Like when I go to Disney, if I don't get the chance to go to the Indiana Jones spectacular, I'll still just walk by there to see if I can hear it.
Just to hear the music.
Just the music, man.
Yeah.
And that's one of those, I think one of those necessary ingredients for it to be a summer blockbuster.
Sure.
Has to have a killer theme.
And we see that a lot in a lot of these movies. Killer, literally in this case. And we see that a lot in the films we're going to be covering. We're going to be doing the Indiana Jones films. We're covering Jaws here. Superman 2, the Superman soundtrack, or at least the Superman song, is another one of those that has transcended Phantom Menace. The entire soundtrack to Tarzan, again, Josh, that is actually the best Disney soundtrack.
Nope.
Just so you can be reminded.
Nope.
Whatever. We'll have this fight.
Top 5, though.
We'll have this fight when we get to that episode. Anyway. But yeah, this is part of the recipe. You need a great soundtrack. You need great characters. Harrison Ford definitely helps as well.
Yeah. Steven Spielberg certainly helps as well. And this was
Spielberg,
one of his earlier movies, too. Also, the first film filmed on the ocean. Which
was it the first one on the ocean? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was the first one actually filmed on the ocean. There were some that were filmed near it, or tried to. But this first one filmed on the ocean. Okay. Being a big beach guy, being a big 4th of July is one of my favorite holidays. This checks all of the boxes as far as like themes and feelings that I like. Has the nostalgia in. Hooper as a character, that sells it for me. Mayor Vaughn as a villain, I'm like, man, I really enjoy this movie. I'm about to have to try and watch it again. Unfortunately, you can't stream it for free anywhere, but for $4, I think you can watch it on Amazon. So, probably worth $4.
I would say so. Definitely a $5 DVD bin at Walmart pickup. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Spielberg went more than double his budget. This was imagine I think it was like his second or third film. More than double his budget. Production for one part was supposed to be 15 days. It took him 115.
Oh my goodness. I've heard of that.
Yeah. Apparently he said that he really didn't think he was going to get hired again after this.
It's a good thing it did well at the box office.
It really is. Or we would have been
in 2020
so deprived.
as well.
Right. Without this, we wouldn't have had Indiana Jones. We wouldn't have had E.T. I mean, you think of all these things that he was able to do after this. Schneider's List.
Jurassic Park.
You said Animaniac. Yeah, Schneider's List. I can't think of the other one. It's like something purple. It was one of those smaller films he did. He did so much good. So much good in the world was done by this.
Yes. It's one of those fixed points in reality, like we have been learning about on all things MCU lately. So let's have the argument now, because Joe and I briefly had this argument over. We didn't even really have an argument. You just raised the question. Jaws, horror film. Is it a horror film? And I actually want Josh to go first because I know what Joe and I said. So, Josh, is Jaws a horror film?
I would describe it as a thriller film.
Okay.
I could understand why someone at the time that it came out would have thought it was horror. I could understand it. I still would think they're wrong. Thinking it now just seems absurd. I just don't understand why anyone would think that today.
Okay.
Because it's not a lot of your elements of horror that I'm aware of just aren't really there. It's a lot more suspense than horror.
Suspense, thriller type of thing. Okay. Joe, obviously we both agreed it's not a horror film.
Right. So this gets looped into horror for a lot of the same reasons why Alien gets looped into horror. Because
Alien?
Yeah, so the xenomorph.
I mean, Alien is kind of scary.
People are weird, man.
Well, the xenomorph is supposed to be like the slasher of the film. Same thing with the shark. That it's supposed to be this killer that can't be stopped and is lurking in the shadows, or in this case under the water, to tear people to shreds and all of that kind of stuff. The issue is outside of that, right? Outside of just drawing the 1-for-1 comparison that says, oh, it has a thing in it that kills people, it must be horror. Outside of that, there's nothing else that actually ties it to the genre. And it's the same thing for Alien. Mm-hmm. Alien isn't a horror movie. It's a sci-fi movie with aliens happen to kill people. That's it. It's sci-fi. It's not horror. So for this, I would say I could live with natural disaster, like we talked about, Brandon. I could be fine with that. Thriller is another good one. Mm-hmm. I would even go as far as to say an action movie, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like people just get confused and like scary. Scary means horror. It does not.
It's intense because it is intense. But like you said, even at the time in the 70s, what did we have in the 70s? That was Halloween was coming out. Texas Chainsaw Massacre was coming out. Was Nightmare on Elm Street. That was the 80s, wasn't it, Joe? Yeah. So you at least have two of the most iconic guys who are just going to go around and kill people at night, just with Leatherface and Michael Myers. So to also then at the time say Jaws is a horror film is a bit of a stretch. Especially, even though, not to downplay though the idea that there were people who were genuinely terrified though of going near bodies of water because they thought sharks were going to then eat them, which is why I make the argument that it is a disaster flick, because disaster films are typically humans against nature rather than humans pitted against each other.
So when I lived in the Midwest, when I lived in Minnesota, I was it just lake culture, right? Like it's a very, very real thing out there. And I met people who legit had a very, very big problem with water because of Jaws. Here's my only problem with that. Watch a documentary. Watch Science Channel for 30 seconds and you'll find out that that's not actually how sharks operate. You know what I mean? Like, yes, it only takes one and, you can't see it. And I get kind of. But science disputes you and I side with science on this one. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't. And maybe it's because I started off with the heavy hitters, but even in comparison to its, at that point in time, contemporaries, you're talking about the seminal slasher movie of all time in Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
Like the one that set the bar, that was never actually touched in that style of slasher flick. Like the supernatural slasher flick, Freddy all day. But with Halloween, like, and even Texas Chainsaw, right? Texas Chainsaw is a gross movie. It is a dirty movie. Yeah. You need to go watch. You need to go take a shower after you watch that movie because it's just gritty. And then you've got this bright and sunny movie with a shark that kills people.
Right.
Like I said, big, popcorn flick. Yes. Scary. I don't think so.
Sure.
I like suspense for this. Just fun, random little things. I have a Universal annual pass, so I go there a lot. And I grew up in Florida, so we went to the beach. We went to Universal and stuff a lot. My first introduction to this movie was the Jaws ride at Universal, which was taken out because of Harry Potter World, which is the only slight I have against Harry Potter World. Sky enjoyed that. Why'd you take it away? There's still one in Japan, apparently. That ride still does exist. But, so there was that. And then I've always spent a lot of time at the beach growing up, too. So it's really interesting that I grew up with just this understanding that sharks aren't mean. They're not scary. Gators are mean. Those are scary.
Gators.
Yeah.
For me, that's always been the big scary thing in the water. Like, I'm like, Jaws is cool, but...
Forget Sharknado. Give Josh Gatornado.
I will not watch
that.
That.
Sound right at all.
Oh man, but I wanted to get back to, we're not talking about the political stuff or any of that, but I did want to kind of get your guys' take. You have to have an economy running in order for society to continue, but obviously there is this line of, which is what they play with in the movie, of how valuable is human life compared to how valuable is society continuing. And I was curious, what other themes in this did you guys see that you thought really were impactful from it? Was it just that, hey, this is fun, or were there other things that really stood out to you?
One thing for me, I was reflecting on this earlier, knowing that Josh was going to ask some type of question like this. It has really astounded me how many times, going back to this disaster flick idea that I have for this movie, it has astounded me how many times here on the show we have brought up IPs related to the environment. We've done episodes and it's been touched on in Godzilla, Ultraman, Captain Planet, Groot. Literally every time I talk about the Lord of the Rings, like some type of protect the environment, take care of the earth thing comes up. And we haven't even gotten to like Swamp Thing or Animal Man yet.
Yeah.
What's interesting about disaster flicks, though, is that it's almost that check and balance of like, yeah, we should be decent humans and take care of the planet, but also the earth and the environment and the weather and the stuff that's out there is outside of our control to some degree. Yes, Jaws definitely demonized sharks more than Spielberg really probably intended to do. But, I'm listening to 20,000 Leagues Under the Seas, and in the opening foreword by some person, he talked about how it's interesting to him that we're trying to explore more and more of space when we haven't even gotten to the very depths of the ocean and really comprehended what's like right here still on our planet. So that's something for me, just kind of running with this idea of the disaster flick that, yeah, we should be taking care of the earth and recycling and all that, be good stewards, but also this idea of like, there is an element to this that we can't control, that it's scary and it's powerful, and we need to be mindful of that.
So there was a movie that I remember it was a preview on the Indian in the Cupboard, the VHS that I had growing up. I can't remember what the name of the movie was, but it was this movie about basically the Loch Ness. It's a giant sea creature movie. And but it was done in a way that wasn't like a weird cryptid movie, but like it was like it kind of tried to be Free Willy, except for with this giant sea creature. And
that's awesome.
That movie did more for scaring me as a young child for gigantic sea creatures than something like a Jaws did or something like that. Like that kind of unexplored, we don't actually know, and there could be these gigantic, almost dinosaur-esque creatures that we have no idea about, and you are literally helpless to against it, sort of thing. So I absolutely vibe with what you're saying. Jaws doesn't get me there, but I do understand the concept that you are talking about. To answer Josh's question, and I can tell, Josh, you are chomping for somebody to bite on this line that you keep throwing out there. So I'll go ahead and bite real quick. Yeah, we have seen. Oh, I'm gonna hurt myself with trying to be this politically correct. We have seen what it looks like firsthand in our generation to put the value of society over the value of human life. We've seen that now. That is a thing that has happened in our lifetime. And part of why I don't allow myself to go there, and it's part of me holding back a little bit on that thinking deeper thing and all of that, is then I won't watch Jaws anymore. I will be done with the movie, because that's still a very sore subject to me. That's we saw some pretty disgusting things happen over the last couple of years. I'm saying universal. I am not holding back on anybody. I'm taking shots at everybody, left, right, center, red, blue, green, in between. I don't care. Everybody screwed up over the last couple of years. And that is probably, I can see how that kind of thing being talked about in the 70s is right. 70s.
Yes.
Yeah. I see the value in talking about that. I do. And I see how interesting it is that it's almost presented in kind of like this megalomaniacal mustache twirling sort of thing, where it's almost like hypothetical in a way. It's not hypothetical anymore. And that's the thing. And I understand somebody from a different generation's pointing to something else where they could say that it wasn't just 2020 and it wasn't just the pandemic and all of those kinds of things. But that's what's in recent memory. And at my age bracket, yes, there are other tragedies that I can point to that came first. But this was the first one where I was hyper aware of the political, religious, systematic overall response to something like this and how those kinds of things get valued. And don't get me wrong, I own a business. I am literally the most capitalistic person probably out of this panel. Like, I get capitalism. I do.
Probably.
But that's what makes me a terrible capitalist in certain ways, because I can't bring myself to value the society continuing and economics continuing and all of these kinds of things over individuals dying. I think that whole utilitarian argument, everything from utilitarianism to the slippery slope and all of that stuff, I think 99% of that can be very easily explained away when people look at things logically. Stop thinking about things in terms of weighing this and weighing that and existential this and all this kind of stuff. No. Think about it logically for 30 seconds and you'll see the path forward. And that's kind of where I land with something like this. Without really becoming immersed, because I don't. My mama told me that if I ain't got nothing nice to say, then I ain't saying nothing at all. Like, I don't have anything nice to say about any of the political stuff. None of it. Not a single solitary bit of it. Not for anybody. Not for anything. But I can at least appreciate that, even if it was inadvertent, which I don't know if it was or not. I don't know if this was something that was like a purposeful commentary piece to this overarching movie, or if it just kind of happened to be a bit of a commentary piece. I can see the value in exploring that. It's just, I don't know. To me, that takes away from the overarching movie of it all, you know?
I always felt like that was one of the main points of it. I kind of want to tie both of what you guys said together. Joe, the thing you like to say or like to complain about with Disney in the whole, humans, you can just decide to be good. I mean, this is clearly we can't, right? I mean, if there's ever a time to decide to be good, it would have been now. It would have been during these kind of moments. And when I think about what this movie shows, the priorities of man, when I show the stuff Joe talks about, the priorities of man, and then thinking about how much of the ocean we haven't explored. And I mean, all of this to me has to get spiritual. I think, I know pastors like to show space and see how big everything is out there, and that's supposed to remind us of God. But when I think just how big the ocean is and how much we haven't seen of that yet,
right.
That's what really reminds me of how small we are. Thinking about these themes of how just wicked society is, I have to believe there is a God for things to be this complex, and I have to see our need for a savior when I see just how bad off we are.
Yeah,
true. Somewhere deep down in the ocean, city of Atlantis.
Yeah,
Cthulhu is supposed to rise out of the deep. We haven't found any of this stuff yet.
Can't wait.
But you are right, Josh. Like this film inadvertently speaks to both the bigness of our God as creator and also just as a society, our general need for a savior, because we're very selfish and very greedy and very inward focused as humans. And Joe, every time you start swinging at everybody, it reminds me of that Royal Rumble when Stone Cold came out and there was a ton of people in the ring and he just like cleans house and tosses everyone. That's whenever this happens, and there's your wrestling reference for this episode. Guys, last thoughts before we start wrapping this one up.
This is one of those that if you are a cinema fan and you have not seen this movie, do yourself the favor and watch the movie for cinema's sake, because this falls very much in line with movies like Pulp Fiction, movies like The Matrix, and others. Those are the first two that pop into my mind, where
Psycho, Citizen Kane, a lot of those classic ones as well.
Right, where a lot of the conversation lends itself to the impact that it had overall on cinema more than just talking about the movie itself. So there'll be beats that you may see in this that you may recognize from other IP elsewhere that took inspiration from this movie. So like I said, if you're a cinema fan and you like the history of movies and things like that, do yourself the favor, check it out.
Joe is correct.
That was a TJ-like response. All right, well, let's just wrap this up then. Okay, so in last week's kickoff episode, Joe and I briefly discussed what our go-to theater snacks are. Josh, why don't you tell us, you did mention your wife doesn't like or can't tolerate the smell of popcorn. So do you get something else? Do you get anything? What do you do?
Well, these days I get nothing. Partially because, the popcorn thing. Partially because that costs less money to get nothing.
True.
And but growing up, my brother and I, we both would split a giant thing of popcorn and a thing of crunch candy, the little crunch candies, and we pour it in the popcorn and mix it up. So you got that like chocolate, the sweet, the salty, the butter. It was great. Good times.
Nice. I never mix them, but sometimes I like to get a box of Junior Mints. That's my movie theater popcorn or movie theater candy choice. I like it. And Joe and I were just classic popcorn guys.
Yep.
Sorry you don't get anything now, but that's what happens when you're a cheapskate. So
I do keep a box of popcorn at the house, and for the days that Tiffany has ladies' night or goes on a trip or something, because I made in my vows actually, I said that I wouldn't pop popcorn in the house while she's home. It was like a joke kind of thing, but I've stood by it. So when she's not home, I pop popcorn.
Claire is gluten-free, so occasionally when she's like at a ladies' night, out of town, whatever, I go get fried chicken and sliders and stuff she can't eat. Joe, do you have anything like that with your wife?
Yeah, so my wife is also gluten-free. She has celiacs, and so
okay.
There are times where if she's out, I may go get like pizza or something like that.
My mom hated Pizza Hut. So every time my mom was gone, me and my brother would get really excited because we knew Dad was going to take us to Pizza Hut.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's cool. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another one of the SG Drive-In episodes. Next time, we will be covering The Godfather featuring Joe, Will, and TJ. Right, guys?
Yep.
Joe, Will, and TJ to talk about another one of those cinematic masterpieces. Everybody has to watch it, The Godfather. So come on back for that. Make sure you go on over to systematicecology.org if you want to find out more about our hosts and the variety of other shows that we're all a part of. And remember, we are all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.
This was an Anazao Ministries podcast. If you enjoyed this show and would like to learn more about our network, be sure to check out the Anazao Ministries podcast network.